Welcome to the Plant-Free MD podcast with Dr. Anthony Chaffee, where we discuss diet and nutrition and how this affects health and chronic disease, and show you how you can use this to optimize your health and happiness, both mentally and physically. Hey guys, just want to take a second to thank our sponsor, Carnivore Bar. I don't promote many products because honestly, all you need to be healthy is to just eat meat. For those times that you're out hiking, road tripping, or stuck at work and you want a nutritious snack that is just meat, fat, and salt if you want it, the Carnivore Bar is a great option. So I like this product not because it's just pure meat, but also because I want the carnivore market to thrive as well. And the more we support meat-only products, the more meat-only products there will be available in the mainstream. So if this sounds like something you'd like to get behind, check it out using my discount code Anthony to get 10% off, which also applies to subscriptions, giving you 25% off total. All right. Thanks, guys. Hey everyone, as Dr. Anthony Chaffee, I'm here with a very special guest, Dr. Miki Ben-Dor, who has done quite a lot of work in paleoanthropology as well as other fields, and showing exactly the evidence and data that we have to show that humans are carnivores. Quite recently, he came out with a paper called The Evolution of Human Trophic Levels During the Pleistocene. And this shows, when he's in conclusion, we hear him talk about it more, but that humans have been apex predators, top of the food chain, and carnivores for at least around 2 million years. Dr. Ben-Dor, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, great to be here.
Good. For people who haven't come across your work and your papers, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and some of the work you've been doing recently?
Yeah, sure. As I said that before we came on, I finished my PhD when I was 68. So I came across Paleo when I was 58. Unfortunately, because it turned out that I had a terrible sensitivity to gluten. And that caused a lot of things, being thin, very thin. In my childhood, I was extremely thin. And but I ate like crazy, but still, and I loved bread. So, and I had terrible headaches and stomach aches, and nobody could explain it at the time. There was no, knowledge of celiac even. So anyway, at the age of 58, I came across Paleo, and at that time I realized that I was eating the wrong stuff for 58 years. So I always envy people like you, for instance, who discovered it much, much earlier, and get all the benefits for many years. And that discovery led me to find my mission, because I've quit work at the age of 52, so about 6 years earlier, and I was studying. For myself, no, not for any particular certification about hunter-gatherers, because I just liked it. I just liked them. And I always had the feeling that we are kind of hunter-gatherers that are stuck in a reality that is completely different to the reality in which we evolved. So it must have a lot of repercussions. And I didn't think much about the food mismatch, but and then I wrote a book. I wrote a book about more about the mental aspects of being in that situation. And then I said, okay, let's add something about the mismatch, the nutritional mismatch. And to my horror, I started reading, the books of good calories, bad calories, and at that time the book about fat was not yet published. But that's when I understood that we are living in one big problem, and so I sort of got myself a mission to help spread the news. And I saw that there is a like opening in anthropology, paleoanthropology. For some reason, paleoanthropologists didn't join that movement. And that was really surprising to me because the basic template is that we have to eat what we were evolved to eat. Is so obvious. So I just couldn't understand why they are not supporting this movement. And actually, I even heard or read some expressions against it. So I decided that I'll go and study methodically what people ate and become qualified, officially qualified to speak about that. And that's how I came to do the PhD in paleoanthropology, or actually it's an archaeology, but in Israel, there's no paleoanthropology that's called paleoanthropology. So that paleoanthropology is actually studied in the prehistory section of the archaeology department.
Okay, very good.
So here I am.
Yeah, that's great. And you came from a background in economics, is that right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And so
until 52, I studied economics and I studied business administration in a very good European school.
Mhm.
And actually, I was offered to have a academic career at the time, but I had such a terrible ADD because of my gluten sensitivity that I just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So I worked for 52 years in in commercial settings until I just had enough. And I had enough so that I could leave.
Yeah.
So I left.
Yeah. Well, I think that I've always liked different economists, and like Thomas Sowell is, I read a lot of his work, and just like the analytical mind that an economist has to have to look at things very, very clinically and objectively, I think is very beneficial in any. I really wish I studied economics in my undergrad, just to get that way of thinking and logical.
Yeah, I think this is one of my advantages. This is one of my advantages in this analyzing the situation, is that I bring some economic discipline into the discussion. And economic discipline, to me, means, first of all, how much. Don't speak in general terms.
Mm-hmm.
Try to be quantitative. And the second one is look at the alternative. So everything has to be measured against an alternative, not by itself. And this led me, for instance, I think the very important understanding that economically speaking, we just could not be omnivores that can do whatever they want and very flexible in our diet, because the energetic return on plants is about 1/10 of that of animals. So it's like going to the supermarket and something costs 10 times more than the stuff that you bought until today. All of a sudden, something costs 10 times and you have to buy it. You would go broke. Yeah. So that's why humans could not live on plants, because the return on animals is so much higher. And we were acting like any species at the border of our energetic return. So, you have to maximize the return.
Yeah. Yeah. I always like that in economics. It's always compared to what, and it's just, people say, oh, well, this is really good. Okay. Compared to what? What are you looking at? And if you don't put it in that context, things just don't make sense. And a lot of these arguments, when put in that framework, they begin to break down quite clearly or be strengthened. And you say, okay, actually, no, actually that does make a lot of sense, because you're comparing this to something else. And obviously, when you get 10 times the yield from, animal products and foods, that does make a lot of sense. Can you take us through, your paper, the evolution of human trophic levels during the Pleistocene? And, you laid out a very, very, considered argument in various different aspects to argue that, or to show the evidence for humans being, apex predators, which, as far as I know, I can't think of really an apex predator that grazes. So that would really mean, carnivores.
Right. The definition that I used is a hypercarnivore.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a definition that is used by zoologists to denote a carnivore that consume 70% or more, 70 that is, or more of their food from animals. So that was my conclusion, that humans were hypercarnivores. And I think the main new thing that I brought, it's not completely new because other people did it as well, but not in such a scale, is to look at the body. Because the problem, first of all, let's define the problem. Let's define why paleoanthropologists think that we were flexible in our diet. So we were omnivores. So first of all, 75% of the mammals are omnivores, as the definition of omnivore, that somebody eat from more than one trophic level. So plants and animals in this case. And but that doesn't say anything about the quantity of plants and animals, or relative quantity that these mammals eat. So yes, we are omnivores, but again, and also it turns out that most of the mammals, like 80% of them, are specialized. In other words, they are not generalists. They won't eat anything. They specialize in either plants or animals, and they complete their diet from either plants or animals. So humans, actually, the fact that we are omnivores does not mean that we are flexible. And I thought to myself, okay, the problem is that when you ask, or when people ask, what was the diet, they went immediately to paleoanthropologists. Unfortunately, these guys just don't have the tools to answer the question, but they don't know that they don't have the tools. So one tool, which actually is giving them the answer, is stable isotopes. The problem with stable isotopes, in which, by the way, most of the studies of stable isotopes show that humans were carnivores, but really top carnivores, until quite recently. And actually, when they moved from meat, they first of all moved to fish, and only then moved to plants, right at the end of the Paleolithic. So they come to them, they don't have, I mean, what you find in archaeological sites is a pile of bones and stone tools. And if you're lucky, you find some plant residues. But it doesn't tell you anything about the relative quantity. First of all, not all the remains of what they ate actually were in this place that you dig. And second of all, plants remains don't stay, are not discoverable easily, because they just disappear. So they actually tended to go to hunter-gatherer societies that they could see. So the main one being the Hadza, because the Hadza live in Tanzania. Tanzania is close to the equator. It's close to where human evolution, at least the early stage of human evolution, took place. Olduvai Gorge is in Tanzania. So they went to the Hadza, and the Hadza eat about 30-40% meat and 60% plants. Actually, quite a lot of it was actually honey. So I looked at that analogy, and it seems to me absolutely misleading in a very, very important way, because the large fauna that was present when humans evolved just is not there for the Hadza to take. They just don't hunt any elephants, they don't hunt rhinos, they don't hunt hippos. And actually, even if they did, in early Paleolithic, there were many, many species of large animals. And today, we're only left to 3 or 4 of what is called mega herbivores. That's over 1,000 kilos. Anyway, the environment is not the same. The technology that they have is not the same. And I just been there last year, and you go from Ngorongoro to their area, and it's completely different. Ngorongoro is a savanna in a crater with many animals and very few plants to eat, in other words, like, because they are mostly, herbs. So there are many herbivores, but there are not many frugivores, for instance, in the savanna. So the environment is not the same, the technology is not the same, and the analogy is false, is faulty. So I said, where do I look? So I decided to look, first of all, into our body, because really the evolution happened, first of all, in our body, then in our behavior too, but in the body. So I was able to find quite a few, I don't remember, I think about 15 pieces of evidence that show that our evolution was towards carnivore. And the ones that I liked most are when other researchers compared omnivores or compared the other carnivores to us, and actually found out that we are in the same group with the carnivores. For instance, in stomach acidity, we even with the scavengers, so even more carnivore than the carnivore. But in fat cells distribution, in the weaning age, so that's the kind of evidence that I was looking for. And I listed them one by one and tried to group them into some groups in terms of the strengths of the evidence, like which ones are actually attesting to a change in the trophic level, and which ones are showing specialization, because that is quite important. If you see, for instance, let's say, take gut morphology. So we have a long small intestine and a short large intestine. And this is the opposite of chimpanzee. So it shows actually a trend towards specialization. Yeah, because specialization is when you give up flexibility. Okay, and this is what actually this evolution caused. It caused us to give up flexibility to feed on a large quantity of fiber. Yeah, actually, most of the energy, plant energy, on the planet is stored in fiber. So a lot of animals, most animals, I don't know actually of one that's not, that rely on plants, make sure that they can utilize fiber. But we actually gave up that ability. So it meant that we actually specialized. And the third one, that was, like I said, the most convincing in my point of view, is that it put us in the same category as carnivores. So this is the, let's say, the physiological. I don't know how into what details you want me to go.
No, that's fine. Like, I mean, I think that the main thing that people talk about, and I've spoken to other people about this. They said, well, where are the randomized controlled trials? Where's the study that shows that humans are carnivores? And ignoring the fact that all the data that we have looking at different diets is all epidemiologically based anyway. We don't have a lot of randomized controlled trials showing anything in one way or the other. And so it's so how do you go about proving that humans are one thing or the other? And so that's why I think that you have to look at other sources like you did. And so with how would you respond to someone saying like, well, where's your randomized control trial saying that humans are carnivores or not?
Well, you see, randomized control trials are actually trying, in the end, to simulate reality. This is what they are. And we have to understand that this simulation will be flawed forever. Now, that's not my. I really don't put much faith in the randomized control trial as far as nutrition is concerned, because you have very, very difficult time controlling the variables, and so really, if you look, I saw one of your podcast with a nice girl, I forgot her name, and you're talking about anecdotes and what is the importance of anecdotes. So I thought I'll talk about it a little bit myself. So I wrote about it in one of my posts in the, actually, traditional societies that Weston Price visited, they were quite healthy. But they didn't have any they didn't have science to speak of. So what they relied on was anecdotes. The thing is that anecdotes, actually, the difference between them and us is that the anecdotes accumulated in the memory of a small group and stayed there and were useful. But we just don't have a depository of anecdotes that will guide us. And that depository of anecdotes in the tribe led to a very, very healthy people, even consuming agricultural diets. Okay, they didn't live to 100 or 120, and as Weston Price marked, the ones that ate meat were always looked healthier than the one that relied on the agricultural plant diet. But still, they were quite healthy. They didn't have any of the westernized, illnesses. So they were quite healthy based on anecdotes that they accumulated. And this is the way, this is how we were. What happened is that as soon as the depository of anecdotes disappeared with the modern living and the reliance of science, that our health deteriorated. So that's my answer to this randomized control trials.
Yeah. Sort of being so sharp you'll cut yourself, like we're using it was like, oh, well, we diagnosed this and analyzed this with all these different metrics, and you came up with the wrong answer. But because you have convinced yourself this was such a thorough scientific endeavor, that you're very, very bought into it. And so it can end up cutting you as well.
Right.
Yeah. I was going to say too, some of the things that we can see pre and post agricultural revolution. I know that you've spoken about, brain size. This was going up steadily and quite markedly in the recent, hundreds of thousands of years, millions of years, and then there was a sharp decline around 20,000 years ago. But then also, we see other data. With teeth and jaws and other sorts of features that it's hard evidence. I mean, this is not like a maybe situation. It's like at this point it was X, at this point it was Y. Can you go into that a little bit? And seemingly that coordinated with the introduction and adoption of more plant-based eating, and certainly the agricultural revolution.
Right. It's amazing if you see the teeth of that are discovered in archaeological sites million years ago, 50,000 years ago. They are perfect, absolutely perfect. All of them are there, and they are all in perfect state. Not that there was you find teeth here and there with problems, but mostly it's just perfect. And these people lived 50 years. And then about 15,000 years ago in Morocco is the first site with very strong evidence for plants food consumption. And the teeth are crooked, and they are full of they are rotting. So the pathology, paleopathology, is just another proof that that we did not eat that much carbohydrates, at least in the form of sugars, or like carbohydrates. Technically speaking, fiber is also carbohydrate. So I have to define it. But yes, we ate plants. That's something that has to be emphasized. To be fair, people ate plants, and you find residues of just about anything you can think of that is food in nature. So there's no question that people ate plants. Only they didn't eat enough to cause that pathologies that we find later on in the Egyptians and even if late Paleolithic people. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, so I guess, and that's the thing too, when you do see the evidence of people eating more plants and then getting more of the, the Western diseases or these sorts of issues. I guess you can start differentiating between, survival and optimization of your health as well. And while we may have eaten plants, if they were available, or if we needed to survive or use medicinally, that again would be different than eating them because they were optimal. And I think that that might.
But they're not even the same plants.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not like we ate. A hunter-gatherer that will go today to a supermarket will not recognize anything as food.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
But I didn't answer your question about the brain. I want to speak about the brain.
Mm-hmm.
So the brain started to grow about 2.5, 2.6 million years ago with Homo habilis. and then grew further with Homo erectus, grew further with the Homo sapiens. And there were some species in between, but that's not the place to go into details. Anyway, so I asked myself, why? Why it grew? And this is, by the way, it's funny, but it's not a question that paleoanthropologists ask.
Mm.
I was surprised. And so I came up with the answer. I don't know if it's the answer, of course. It's a hypothesis like anything else in history, or definitely in prehistory, where you can prove nothing. Mm-hmm. But then I found out that large animals started to disappear much earlier than paleoanthropologists realize. And they all know about the late Quaternary megafauna extinction, which took place about 40, 50,000 years ago, peaked about 20,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago. Everybody knows about that one. But I found out that it began much, much earlier. So let's say, I'm not sure when exactly, but 700,000 years ago. So the theory goes that in order to hunt smaller animals, you need to be smarter. And this is, again, something that paleoanthropologists couldn't imagine. I don't know why, but they thought, wow, an elephant is a very frightening animal. So it must have been very difficult to hunt, but it's not, because elephants don't escape. So you just dig a hole, cover it with leaves and branches, and wait, and an elephant will fall, especially smaller ones that are not as experienced as the big one. So he will fall, and that's it. You can finish it. He can't move. So it's actually very, very simple. I mean, you need courage. I'm not saying you don't, but to hunt larger animals is to limit their movement in one way or another, driving them into a canyon or something, or mud, for instance. That's also works. And then you can finish them with a wooden spear. You just have to make them bleed. So in the bleed enough time, you're not in a hurry because they're not running away. They die, and you eat them. And one of them will last you for a month. So hunting large animals didn't need much energy and also didn't need much brain. But when you start to hunt smaller animals, they become smaller and smaller targets. They move faster and faster, so they are more difficult to hunt. So you need to be smarter to hunt them. So you need to develop new tools. So you need to develop what they call composite tools that are composed of more than one system. So you have to have the wood, and you have to have the stone, and you combine them in a weapon system that is fast and can chase a small animal. So that's what happened, in my opinion. And that is that at the beginning, the brain expanded for us to become hunters in the first place. So really, and by the way, this is a general phenomena that predators have a larger brain than herbivores. Mm. Because really, you don't need much of a brain to go and eat grass.
Yeah.
But you do need some brain to catch an animal.
Yeah.
So that's how it grew. And but why it became all of a sudden smaller about 20,000 years ago? And it so happened that it coincides with the increased consumption of plants. Mm. Now, you can say, and I think that you said it, is that because they ate the plants, the brain became smaller.
Yeah.
That's a possibility.
Yeah.
But to me, it became smaller because they didn't need it.
Mm.
And evolution doesn't leave expensive tissue that it doesn't need.
Yeah.
So to grow or to become a farmer, I mean, I know there must be very smart farmers around, but at that time, compared to hunting, that you have to go every day and solve problems and know so much about nature just to be able to track an animal. Compared to that, eating plants and growing plants doesn't demand that much brain.
Yeah.
So that's my conclusion about the brain.
Yeah, and it could be a combination of both too. We're not required, as well, and we're also not, getting all the nutrition, and we're curtailing it.
Yeah,
with
for sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, and then that the mass extinctions as well of the megafauna, that seems to coincide as well with the adoption of agriculture as well. Is that likely because
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. The animals became so small that they just could not supply the fat. And here we come to the fat side of the business. Because humans can consume more, like maybe 35% of the calories as a protein. So they have to complete it with something else, either carbs or fat. That's it. These are the three. And so smaller animals have less fat. One of the reasons is because they have to run and they have to escape. So they cannot rely on their size. They have to rely on their speed. And of course, their speed will go down if they fat, like we are. I mean, we can see it in our situation.
Yeah.
So the last megafauna extinction was so severe that just people had to start relying on plants more. And it just showed the fact that we moved to agriculture just showed that we could not rely on the natural abundance of plants. We had to grow them ourselves.
Yeah, and that, I think that illustrates your point earlier about comparing the Hadza to our genetic origins. This is a very different time. We didn't have the megafauna that we were hunting before. These massive animals in abundance that we were normally hunting, and then we had to sort of look at other things. So if we're trying to extrapolate what we've been living as a genetic population for 2 million years, we really can't look at those. And also, I think the Hadza is a bit of a problematic group to look at in any case, because they're sort of, like you say, they're getting like 30% of their food is coming from meat. Whereas you look at, the Inuit, it's 100%. I mean, there's nothing else to eat at the North Pole anyway. And, and you look at people, during different ice ages, where was the honey available, in the baobab trees there?
Right, but the argument there is that the Hadza are living close to where human evolved.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they do, but the environment is not the same.
Yeah.
And the technology, look, for instance, bow and arrow really appeared first about 60,000 years ago. So for over 2 million years, we had to hunt without bow and arrow. So we had to rely on larger animals. We just could not hunt the smaller, faster animals.
Yeah.
Unless we were really lucky. So you do find smaller animals from time to time in Paleolithic, early Paleolithic sites.
Okay. Yeah.
Mainly large animals.
Yeah, and that's another good point as well, that I didn't even think to go into when I sort of spoke about this previously, is the tools. We have tools that are I mean, obviously, we made tools to hunt and everything like that, but I didn't even think about the distinction between tools for hunting and tools for agriculture, and I think I watched something where you pointed out that, tools for agriculture didn't come around until about, sort of 15, 20,000 years ago. Before that, it was all hunting, and so, I mean, I don't see how a spear is going to be an advantage to get fruit from a tree. Certainly not a bow and arrow. You certainly don't have to catch a lettuce. And I've pointed out to people on the vegan side of this that our brains probably grew in order to be hunters and use tools. And they said, and I was like, what's the argument for our brains growing to get fruit? Why and get plants? Why? Like a chimpanzee and a gorilla, they stayed pretty stable. Ours changed. If we were just eating the same things they were, what would influence our brain to change? They didn't really have an answer for that, but I think that's also a very, very good point, that, the tools before, the 20,000 years ago were just designed for hunting.
Yeah, but I must say that, that the stone tools, most of them have a sharp edge. So the argument goes that the sharp edge could be used to process plants as well. And there are also some signs on the edge itself that show that it was used to process some plants material. So in that sense, it's not exactly black and white picture, but if you look for tools that were specific for plants processing, they appear very late.
Yeah.
Very late. Like you said, 15,000 years ago, maybe.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I suppose, any sort of edged weapon can be used for all sorts of different things. But I wouldn't imagine that a spear.
They have to work, for instance, the hide, they have to work. So it's not just cutting meat.
Yeah.
That they use the tools for.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So, that's something that we sort of touched on, the different sorts of plants and eating like specific ones, and we're eating different plants, and that, that obviously certain plants have to be prepared in certain ways, or else they can be quite dangerous and poisonous. And, certainly, we're probably likely eating very, very different plants than we were even at the beginning of agriculture. Can you talk a bit about that? On the differences in the plants that we're eating now as well?
Well, it's quite obvious that the fruits, for instance, I once calculated that actually a chimpanzee gets most of its energy from fiber. Mm-hmm. It turns fiber into fats, as we know, and feed on the fat. And actually, he gets more energy from the fat of the fiber than it gets from the sugar in the fruit. So one of the researchers, Wrangham, tried once to eat the fruits that chimpanzees eat. He just couldn't. It was too fibrous and really not that sweet. And these were supposedly ripe fruit. Yeah. So the fruit is completely different than what we have. Tubers, again, they were bred to have less toxins and less fiber. All the plants that contain carbohydrates had that. You can see that the fiber, removing the fiber, was the main task. Okay, that humans took. They did it with, of course, with the. This is why grains were so popular because you can remove the fiber quite easily, mechanically, from the grains. So yeah, so that was the domestication, is the removal, is a one big enterprise to remove fiber.
Yeah.
And so, and then of course what you get is a big shot of sugar, when you eat it.
Yeah. That's a funny thing too. Obviously we've had processed white rice and other grains that have removed the fiber and the husks and things like that. And then there was that fad that's like, no, that's where all the vitamins are. You want that. You want the fiber. So brown rice is better. Whole wheat, all that sort of thing. And now it's sort of coming back the other way, like, oh, actually, we really want to do white rice because it doesn't have all these other problems. So we just keep going back and forth. So I think that's funny. That's come back around full circle. To say that you actually want to eat white rice. And I mean, and that's the thing too, we have these traditions of food preparation, especially with plants. And they obviously, like you say, this history of anecdotal evidence. You just have these traditions that basically like, hey, this works, this doesn't, and you have years and generations of learned knowledge. And like this is why people would peel potatoes and peel roots and tubers, and then now all of a sudden, just in the last 20 years, it's like no, that's where all the vitamins are. And it turns out it's like, well, yeah, that's where all the poison is too. It's this barrier defense against insects and animals boring into the tuber to eat it, or the fruit even. And this is why we traditionally would peel potatoes, which are nightshades, and that's where more of the toxins were. And and if they turn,
the Ethiopians, they eat teff. It's a kind of a cereal that they have, and the bread that they first of all, they ferment the teff for 2 weeks, 2 whole weeks. They just sit on it before they consume it. Now, as an economist, I tell you, this is expensive. To keep 2 weeks inventory, but they had to do it. And if you ask them why they do it, they don't know. They don't know. They just know that if they don't do it, they get stomach aches and they become sick. So, by the way, this is the anecdotes that we lost. This kind of, preparation. Yeah. The modern society, you eat without preparing. You don't even know. Most people that eat, grains and legumes don't know how much preparation went into it before pre-preparation, before cooking, in healthy traditional societies. So you have the blue, what do you call them? The blue spots, or whatever.
Or the blue zones.
Blue zones, yeah. But the blue zones are exactly the societies that know how to prepare the food, how to prepare or pre-prepare their food before cooking. So this is one of the differences between them, blue zones. There are other differences, but anyway, yeah, this is one. And then, we think that we can eat anything.
Yeah. Well, and thing too with like sprouted grains, people saying that's, you want to have grains that are sprouted and all these sorts of things. And I agree. If you're going to eat plants, there are ways of doing this to make it less of a problem. But I mean, but this just goes to show the principle that plants are trying to stay alive and they use defense chemicals to protect themselves. And so we've sort of been out of that evolutionary arms race, keeping up with these defense chemicals. And so we have to do this outside preparation to make them less toxic to us. And so that just, again, shows the principle that plants are toxic. And so if you want to survive, that's one thing. If you want to live optimally and have the absolute best health possible, I would argue that you would really want to just avoid these things completely. I mean, even if you got them, devoid of toxin, just, zero poison level, it's still not going to have the nutrient quality of, especially fatty meat. And so you're still going to have this disparity in health benefit that you'll get from this, I think, anyway.
Yeah, it's always a question of, how much restricted how restricted you want your life to be.
Mm-hmm.
And you gain health, but, you have to be very disciplined. I did all of them. I did paleo, I did the keto, I did the carnivore. No argument. Carnivore is the best.
Yeah.
Is the best. You feel the best. No question about it. As soon as you give up all the rest, all of them, not, and eat only meat, my God, this is the best feeling that you can have.
Mm-hmm.
But I will be the first one to admit that it's very, very difficult to maintain. You have to be really, really convinced and really disciplined personality to keep it for a long time.
Yeah. And yeah, it can be. I think it's, for me, it was just an automatic thing. I didn't see it as that hard because I just learned how poisonous plants were. I'm like, yeah, no, I'm not eating that. And so it was very easy for me because I just wanted to avoid that stuff. And then when some of it got back in
coffee.
No, I don't drink coffee. No? I feel much better without it. And so even though I work, pretty crazy hours at the hospital, and then sometimes I'll do like a 36-hour shift or even a 48 or 60-hour shift when I'm on call for the weekend. Sometimes you'll get sleep. Sometimes it's very busy, and you may only catch an hour or two sleep or something like that, and then you're working Monday, and so that can be very, very difficult. I would not be able to do that if I wasn't doing what I'm doing now. Without a lot of supplements and stimulants. But I find that when I do drink coffee, or I generally, if I were to take something, I would take like a caffeine pill and just avoid the other things that are in coffee that would detract. I feel good for a few hours. I have energy. I'm beaming, and then I just absolutely just feel like garbage. I regret ever having touched it. And like the rest of the day, I'm like, oh, why did I do that? Why did I do that? And so even then,
it's very difficult. It's very difficult to believe.
Yeah.
How bad plants can be.
Yeah.
Because we were raised with the healthy salad.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're dangerous, all of them.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, I thought it was a pretty established principle in botany. Was it this in horticulture? I mean, this is just what plants do. This is how they protect themselves. Like all living things, they are able to defend themselves, and they can't run away or fight back. So they need to be have other means, and they have different things as well that are actually quite interesting. Mimicking caterpillar eggs and things like that, so that butterfly doesn't lay eggs on that leaf. But but by and large, they all use poison. As far as I know, I don't actually know of any plant that isn't poisonous to something. Yeah.
Yeah, that they have more genes than humans, and they have more genes than other animals.
Yeah.
I think this is the main reason, is because they have to produce so many chemicals to protect themselves.
Yeah, that's a good point. And you're talking about the being restrictive in the way we eat, as if you wanted to do a carnivore diet in the modern day and age. And there's someone I was speaking to who basically cured his major depression and other major issues, where he was suicidal for decades and just really wasn't able to function as an adult. And he reversed all of these things by going carnivore, and it really changed his life. And he's like one of the most, I think and that's actually his handle on social media is the thankful carnivore. And he is so thankful because this is really giving him his life back, or giving him his life in the first place, because he was quite unwell for most of his adult life. And he was saying that, like he doesn't see it as restrictive. He says, it's like major depression is restrictive. Diabetes is restrictive. Heart disease and obesity are restrictive. Like this is freeing. This gives me life. This allows me to live my life fully. And I like that sort of glass half full sort of look at it.
Concentrate on the benefits, right?
Yeah. And it does, I mean, that was sort of a natural for me too, was it's like, that's poison. I don't want that. And then when it did slip in, I would just not feel as good. And it would just be like, yeah, I don't like that. I just, so now I have a natural aversion to it. It's not, I don't go through sort of wishing I could eat things.
It's becoming easier and easier as you follow the.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Especially with that sort of positive mindset as well.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Which sort of, leads to the question, what does the good doctor eat now? What are your dietary habits now?
Right now, it's very recent, but it's just meat and water.
Oh, good.
But it's very recent in the last few days.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I was with my kids in New York, so we ate, and it was quite impossible to keep it. But just meat and water. That's it. I decided. That's it. At my age, I don't know how many years I have left, but these years I would just do meat and water.
Yeah,
that's it.
Well, I think you're going to have a lot more years with meat and water than you would otherwise as well.
Hopefully, yeah. Well, that's the
idea. Yeah. And so now, like, are you just doing just like red meat or any sort of meat, and obviously going for fatty sets as well?
I try to do red. My wife insists on buying, chicken from time to time, but I have a little problem with that. To guide my wife towards the more expensive meats, but I eat quite a lot of liver. Mm-hmm. I love liver. Mm. But again, I don't think it's healthy to eat a lot of liver. Mm. So I try to limit it to once a week, but sometimes I do twice a week. Yeah. We buy all kind of meat, head meat, Mm-hmm. I don't know how you call it in English, but the meat of the head is
cheek and jowls and brain and things like that.
Well, the head, yeah.
Yeah.
The brain, I eat brain as well, but not the brain. Mm-hmm. It's very, very tasty and very fat. Mm-hmm. So any red meat, especially like you said, fat. Mm-hmm. Israel meat is very expensive. So ribeye, I could live on ribeye, but it's just unbelievably expensive.
So bad. Yeah. I think everywhere it's basically doubled in price in the last year. I was basically just eating ribeye. I would get it in bulk from Costco, and it was much cheaper that way. And now it's literally doubled in price from Costco as well. And so I just said forget it. And now I'm just doing like New York's mostly, and then just like we'll melt some butter onto that as well.
In Israel, it was double in the first place.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's unbelievable how much it costs. It is like,
yeah.
Maybe if I can try it on $40 a kilo, $50 a kilo.
Oh wow! So, yeah.
It's like 20 something dollars a pound.
Yeah, and that's US dollars. Yeah, so in Australia, that'd be for people in Australia. It's like add on another third to that, and so that would be quite expensive. Yeah,
even more. It can even cost $70 sometimes.
Jesus. $70. Yeah, which is not, that's not really reasonable. Yes, just to try to be eating that every day.
I mean, yeah, it could. to me, actually, to me, it was reasonable, but not to my
Yeah.
if it was up to me, I would have bought it.
Yeah, yeah. It's usually the other way around. It's usually like, husband's just like, can you not spend so much money? Now it's just like, what are you doing, chicken? This peasant bird? Like, let's go.
By the way, birds, I wanted to say, people did not consume birds for meat. I mean, the birds are, there's very little evidence for birds as meat source. In very special situation, very seasonably, with nets, you can get, reasonable quantity of meat. But really, like when the birds migrate, so it's like what, one day a year or whatever. So birds, human did not consume birds.
Okay, all right. When did that pick up?
When did that pick up?
Yeah.
When birds are more cheaper to produce.
Yeah.
That's it. That's
so with like
it is.
domestication of birds.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, there isn't much meat on a duck, and if you're trying to get that thing with a bow and arrow, good luck.
They're just too difficult to catch for the reward, for the return.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a good point. And then you talk about fat as well. Fat being something that we went after. What sort of evidence do we have of that we were going after the fat, and what is like an optimal fat ratio for humans?
Okay, the evidence, there one I don't know the name of the genes, but I bring a paper in the paper that you mentioned. I cite a paper of one researcher who compared humans to chimpanzees, and he said that actually humans turn off genes that allow them to consume more fat, and chimpanzees turn on genes that allow them to consume more sugars. Okay. So humans actually evolved to eat more fat, no question about it. The pattern of hunting animals also show that humans were concentrating on fat. The main one, the really shocking one to me, is that humans specialized in hunting prime adults. Prime adults are they're 2, 3 years old already, 3, 4 maybe years old animals that already passed their growing stage. And they contain, in general, more fat than the young and the old. So the young grow, so they cannot allow themselves to have a lot of fat reserves. And the old already don't eat well. That's the way that usually they die, is because their teeth become inefficient. So they don't have a lot of fat. So the prime adults have more fat. Now, for a predator to concentrate on prime adults doesn't make sense, because these are the guys that run faster, more experienced, more alert to the hunter. So they are more difficult to hunt. But yet, humans specialized on hunting them. And again, as an economist, there must be a very good reason for somebody to spend more energy to hunt a special segment of the population. And the only reason I could find was that they have more fat. Otherwise, there's no reason whatsoever that we could find for that behavior. So, and also in that case, you can go to ethnography and you can find, I don't know how many, but many, many examples of recent hunter-gatherers that say that we hunt for fat. We want fat animals. And in Australia, for instance, there are 2 evidence that I cite, I think, in the paper, or not in that paper, in another paper, that hunters when they hunt a fatless animal, junka, they have even a name for animals without fat.
Mhm.
They just leave it. They just don't consume. They just give it up. They go, leave it and go. So that's how important fat is. And when you think about it, if we are limited in the amount of protein that we can eat, and plants are very expensive to get energetically, so we are left with completing, if we don't eat plants, it's 65% of the calories from fat.
Yeah.
So that's what I think was the case in most of the Paleolithic, is that we ate about 60% of our calories, 50, 60, depends, from fat.
Yeah. And you mentioned Australian Aboriginals. I actually spoken to a few down here, just in the hospital setting, and just got into this conversation. And they were sick and unwell, and just sort of brought up that this could be to do with things that they were eating. And the one gentleman I was speaking to sort of looked at that and said, it's like, yeah, when I was a kid, we only ate meat. And everyone was thin and healthy and strong, and our grandparents, like that, they weren't having these problems. And he even said to me, he's like, yeah, eating meat's really good. And he pointed at me and he said, and the most important part is the fat, like that. And it was just right away. And I was like, couldn't agree with you more on that. The Native Americans as well. I remember, as a kid, we were learning their hunting practices. When they would take down a deer or something like that, they would skin it and take out the entrails, and then they would actually remove the haunches and the hind legs and hang them up on the tree. And at the time, it was explained to me that this was sort of an offering to the spirits and as a sacrifice. But it also lines up with the leanest portions of the animal. Has the least amount of fat. The hind quarters in a deer or an animal, there's going to have the least fat. And then you get the forequarters, you can get all the the abdomen and everything like that is going to have much more fat. And so it just happens to line up with getting the most fat out of the animal. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
No, there are plenty of evidence for that. It's just it's unbelievable how easy we can forget and we can ignore. Take Laurent Cordain. I don't know if you heard about him. He was the first paleo, that made a big deal about paleo. He wrote the book, The Paleo Diet.
Okay.
And he did research, but he was, a product of his time. And he had friends that thought that saturated fat was the source of all evils. So you have a paper where he's trying to prove that humans ate fat, but it wasn't saturated fat.
Yeah.
But the numbers are there. If you take the numbers from his paper, you find that the saturated fat was a very prominent portion of the fat that they had.
Yeah.
40% of the fat. So, but still, he had to show, and he had to, live with his friends, with the notion, with the spirit of the time.
Yeah. And that's it too. When I was a kid in the 80s, we learned that humans were, apex predators, top of the food chain. We ate all these animals. And then as we went along, we were saying that, no, actually meat's really bad for you and it kills you, and plants are good. And not only are plants better, and our forebears were just, these silly people that didn't know any better, and they just all were dying of heart disease in their 20s or something like ridiculous like that. But that, no, we're actually herbivores, and we actually evolved as herbivores. And it's like, we've done such a 180, and it's all, I think, stems at that nonsense that saturated fat and cholesterol are bad for you. And because of that, it's just completely taken over, I mean, there's 100 years of scientific literature talking about the importance of fat and a meat-based diet. In fact, people were like, Dr. Salisbury in the 1800s, Professor Stephenson, with Fat of the Land. Salisbury was a clinician. He was actually, putting people on a pure red meat and water diet. So where the Salisbury steak comes from, and he was getting rid of things like rheumatoid arthritis, Crohn's, gout, ulcerative colitis, all these things like that. And and it was backed up with future literature and people looking at this and going, oh, okay, well, let's look into that. Ketogenic diets as well being used to treat diabetes type 1 and type 2 for over 100 years, and treating migraines and even epilepsy for 90 years now. And all of that's just been thrown away just because, that's bad.
Yeah, this is the problem with the science.
Yeah.
Science is a big problem.
Yeah.
Science is a culture phenomena as much as anything else. And there's so many biases that go into it, especially when in nutrition, it's the worst.
Yeah, absolutely.
So really, it may be better just to ignore science whatsoever as far as nutrition is concerned. Really.
Yeah.
Just go to prehistory, just go to evolution, just go to biology. I mean, you have to measure the evidence based on scientific principles. But boy, how many people are built to do that? How many people have the time and the know-how to compare randomized controlled trials?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even to recognize, the validity of those randomized controlled trials, and looking at other things, because a lot of nutrition is epidemiology, which when done well can give you interesting information, but it's never going to show hard facts about things in a conclusive way. Even randomized controlled trials are going to be difficult to do that, and as you say, some of these things are not possible or ethical to do. Really, you're never going to control all the variables. You're not going to have people, identical twins.
How can you do blind? How can you do blinding?
Yeah.
Food.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. Just make, carrot shaped steaks, but yeah, you can't. And it would be unethical too. I mean, how are you? I mean, animal nutrition is actually quite a robust field, because you can take 10,000 head of cattle that are, genetically the same or similar, and expose them to different environments, keeping everything else constant, and you can actually see the difference. And you can't do that with people. That's not ethical to raise humans just for these experiments and have them go through their whole life and see what happens. It would also take a really long time, because humans live for a while in proportion of other humans who are running the trial. So, it's not really feasible to do that as well. And I think this goes back to, what we were saying before, is that, we can sort of become a bit enamored with our own brilliance and fool ourselves into.
Yeah, again, it's a simulation of reality. So the simulation in nutrition is impossible. A good simulation is impossible. So you're better off going to reality, and going to your reality, going to your friend's reality, going to good reported reality. And this is anecdotes. Yeah. So I think as far as in nutrition, anecdotes is and reliable anecdotes. I mean, that's also, you have to be careful about, analyzing the anecdotes, because people lie to themselves, they lie to others. I have a problem with the Australian guy who insists that he can eat 60% protein and nothing happens to him. So this is an anecdote. But really, if you go and measure, I would go and I would look very carefully at that statement. and maybe he doesn't eat many calories. So yes, 60% of 1,000 calories a
Okay.
day. Yeah, you can eat protein in a case 60%. But anyway, the anecdotes also have to be examined and reported in a good way. But in my opinion, this is the way to go. Look for good anecdotes.
Yeah, I often quote Richard Feinstein, or sorry, Richard Feynman, the physicist.
Feynman,
yeah, where he said that it doesn't matter how brilliant your theory is, and it doesn't matter how smart you are. If it doesn't agree with experiment, it's wrong, and that perfectly displays what you were talking about, where you were trying to simulate reality, but you're never going to simulate it perfectly. You're never going to get the entire complexities of the world and certainly human life down to a T. Einstein, obviously, who Feynman worked with on the Manhattan Project, he thought about, we have this theory of everything, you could prove everything and all this sort of stuff. I mean, they were working on the idea that our galaxy was the entirety of the universe, because we didn't know there was anything more than that. And if you had that sort of finite space, maybe you can figure something out. Obviously, there's billions and trillions more galaxies out there, and clusters of galaxies, superclusters. So you're really not going to figure all that out. You're never going to get all the variables. But what Einstein did, he still held to that principle. Whereas he's like, if I can prove this mathematically, we can look at that. But then they would look and experiment and actually look at reality and look at the real world around them. And if it didn't match up, he would throw it out. Whereas, other people say, no, I proved it mathematically. It has to be true because math is always true. It's like, well, only if you're working with a full data set, and you're not. You never will be, and especially if it's not lining up with reality. So I think that's exactly to your point, that you need to actually just look at reality. Experiments are nice. Randomized controlled trials are great if they're done properly, but that's not a substitute for real life.
Right. And the other thing is that they normally report averages. So I can assure you one thing: you are not the average. You are absolutely not the average. You must be either above or below the average. The average is just a number that nobody had of the the population that were examined. Yeah. So start to look at the spread of the data, and you realize that the information is useless. In many cases. I'm not saying I'm talking a little bit harsh here, but maybe there are things that we can learn. By the way, most of the paleo experiments were quite successful, and again, that's paleo with the bias against fat. Because they took Laurent Condé's book and said, this is paleo. So what do you call paleo? That's another thing in nutrition. What do you call low carb? What do you call paleo? But the names that they give to things, is also funny. I mean, this is...
Yeah. Well, I would call carnivore actual paleo, because that's according to the actual data.
That's the real paleo.
Yeah, exactly.
Carnivore is the real paleo.
Yeah. That's funny about averages. I remember, who was it? George Carlin, the comedian. He had a joke where he said that, the average IQ is 100. And so if you think about it, because it's an average, half the people that you meet will be below average intelligence. And it was just like, whoa, yeah, I guess that's right. It's kind of funny to think about. And just hopping back to something you said about protein, saying that, because that is something that gets spoken about, that if you have more than 35-40% of your calories from protein, that this can cause a problem, and so you need to either substitute fat or carbohydrates for the actual production of energy. Obviously, there's a difference between building up protein and using it as an energy source. But then something that was interesting, you said if you're eating sort of lower calories, like 1,000 calories, maybe you can eat more protein. Is that because there's more of a maximum, grams of protein a day that is?
Yeah, it's the grams. It's the grams.
Yeah.
I mean, the body doesn't work by percentage.
Yeah.
Sure, it's a gram.
Yeah.
So assuming that you consume about 2,500 calories, that will make it about 35%. But really is in terms of grams, I would say, and it also, by the way, depends on how much protein you use for structural needs.
Right.
Depends on your level of activity and how much exercise you do and all that stuff. So I would say the limit is very close to 4 grams per kilogram.
Okay.
I mean, it can be 4.4, it can be 3.8 or whatever. Nobody gets getting close to that.
Yeah, that's huge. So I'm like, 105, so it'd be over 400 grams of protein a day.
More.
Yeah, that's massive. Yeah.
So for 60 kilos, it's what? It's 240 grams. No, 60 kilos, 240 grams.
Yeah.
240 grams is more than a kilo of meat.
Mm-hmm.
So
and very lean meat too. Yeah. And very lean meat as well. Yeah, like pure lean. Yeah.
Right. Lean meat. I mean, how many people eat that?
No, I mean, I would eat, over a kilo of meat, and then some on days I'm working out and lifting heavily, I might eat 2 kilos, maybe a bit more, but that's very fatty. It's very fatty meat. I'll get. It's certainly not lean. It doesn't even taste good. Like very lean meat tastes good for a little bit, and then it's just like, ugh, that's getting boring. And I sort of think of that as my.
Also, by the way, it's not something acute. It's not like if you eat more in one day that you die.
Yeah.
I mean, the evidence that they have from hunters that used to go. This is why they call rabbit starvation.
Yeah.
They used to feed on rabbits. It took few weeks to get to a pathological situation.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah. Great. Sorry, what else was I going to ask you? And then, that was it. I'm sorry, I forgot my my next question. I'm sorry. No, but I was going to say too. Some people say that, because we made some changes in the last sort of, 10, 20,000 years, that now we're just like a different species and then we should be eating all these other things. In your research into this, do you think that would hold true, or do you think that it'd be more optimal to hold to, what we were eating historically prior to, the agricultural revolution?
Okay, so my position on that is that yes, we went through some evolution. Evolution happens all the time as we speak. It never stops. So yes, I believe that we have more and more people that are getting more adapted to consuming large quantities of carbohydrates, and even getting maybe somehow to manage to absorb more or to get along with some poisons. And the problem with that, and we did, I mean, take milk, for example. Some people are sensitive to milk, some people are not. Fructose, some people are more sensitive to fructose, some people are not. So there is a variety in the population, and there always is. I mean, this is what moves evolution, that there is one of the conditions is that there will be variability in the genes of the population. But how many of us know whether we are sensitive to milk or whether we are sensitive to to anything? So we just don't know. We don't know unless we try it ourselves. And also there, some damage may accumulate over 20, 30 years. and you don't know about it, and then it appears. So oxalates, all kind of stuff. So we don't know. That's why I treat paleo as a safety tablet. And I just forget about it. We just don't know. So let's be safe. Okay, it costs with restriction, but in my opinion, it pays.
Yeah, I guess that's a good point. Is that whether or not you come from people that are a bit more adapted to something, carnivore being a safety catch. Well, we know that's safe. We know that's beneficial. We know that works for us. And so, maybe you can get away with drinking coffee or doing something else, but you know that this is a safe starting point. Maybe you can venture out from there. I mean, I don't want to venture out from there because I like feeling at my best, but it's something that you can at least use it as a starting point, and then branch away from if you want to, and see how it goes. Yeah,
that's why I told you that I'm so adamant that I will from now on be carnivore, because now in New York,
yeah,
I tried not to be, and
okay, yeah,
boy, was I punished.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so how do you feel now that you've gone just pure meat?
Crazy. I mean, it's absolutely fantastic. No question. I mean, you forget about anything else. You live, you spend all your thinking to other things. You just don't think about food, and you don't think about aches here and there. You're just so alive and so feeling so wonderful.
Yeah.
I know. I mean, it's not a surprise to me. I used to be a carnivore, and then I left it for a while, and I'm coming back now.
Yeah, I think some people, friends of mine that went carnivore sort of around the time I did, years ago. From my influence, they they did for like a year and they felt great, and they sort of slipped off of it. Usually because alcohol, people like to drink, and then they think like, well, I'm gonna drink, just throw the whole thing out. Which of course you don't have to do. You don't have to eat more poison just because you had some poison. And they always ask me, is this like, oh yeah, you're still doing that? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. I'm not going anywhere near that stuff again. And I also, you mentioned the the mammal size and things dropping down. That was something I thought was really interesting. I saw one of your talks. We were talking about how the size of the average mammal sort of, to jump back a bit, increased sort of dramatically over several million years, many tens of millions of years. And then all of a sudden there's just this sharp decline that sort of coincided with us starting to hunt these things.
Yeah, this is also something that I don't understand why other people didn't notice. I mean, you go to history. History is giving you like a perspective. So that if you go back 65 million years, this is when the dinosaurs became extinct. So the mammals had room to evolve. And so they became larger and larger and larger and larger. And until about 2.5 million years ago, the average size of if you take all the species of mammals, terrestrial mammals, was about 500 kilos. That was the average.
Yeah, massive.
So elephants at that time used to weigh 12 tons. Today they weigh 4, 5, 6 tons. So you have like the 2 elephants in one elephant. So that's how big they were.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't surprise us because the world can tolerate that size. If we go back to the dinosaurs themselves, there were some huge animals there. And I'm sure that if we had enough time left, also mammals could grow to that size. There are some advantages to being big. But then today, so it's 500, right? 500 was 2.5 million years ago. Today it's about 10 kilos. So what happens in 2.5 million years that didn't happen in the 65 million years before that? Humans. That's the main. And we know that humans hunted large animals. So why do I need to write papers about it? It's so obvious.
Yeah. 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 Well, I think it's a good thing too, coming from your background in economics, is you were, you didn't spend your whole career in academia and beyond in paleoanthropology and learning, the boundaries of the known universe. You came in from the outside and started asking different questions that people hadn't asked before. It's
Yeah, you're right.
advantage.
I had some advantage in that sense, that I didn't grow inside the discipline.
Yeah.
There's a reason they call it discipline. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fine.
I think there was I think it may have been a Thomas Sowell book, but he was pointing out a similar phenomenon in anthropology, that a lot of people that made a lot of the great sort of leaps in understanding were layman novices or had nothing to do with archaeology, anthropology, and they just sort of looked at it and were just interested in it and said, oh, and they had a different take on it. And that is the definition of thinking outside the box, because you go to school and you get taught the box, and this is the limit and the boundaries that you live in, and you just live inside this box. But these people are outside of this, and they look at it from a different angle, and they can see things in a different way.
There's a good example to that. The theory of tectonic plates, right, moving.
Mm-hmm.
That theory was, I don't know if it was the first, but really was the leader in introducing the theory. He was a meteorologist. He wasn't a geologist.
Mm-hmm.
And for many years, they mocked him until they found out that he was correct.
Yeah. Yeah, that's usually the way. They you come up with a radical, radical thought, and then you're mocked and ridiculed by all the people whose research and careers that would disrupt, and then all of a sudden it's just like, oh, okay, yeah, no, they're right, and which is good. It just sort of shows you human nature as well as not being as nice as it could.
This is, like I said, science is there's a lot of sociology that you have to take into account when you look at science.
Yeah, well, that's what they say, that science.
People make it, and people have, people are not machines.
Mm.
But in science, you are actually asked to become like a machine, yeah, and to be objective, and to be weighing the evidence, without any bias. Forget it.
Yeah. That's what they say is, science advances one funeral at a time. Yeah, you have some, megalith in the.
No, it's absolutely correct.
Yeah,
it's absolutely correct. I could see it in paleoanthropology. There was a scientist that was like a leader, and he claimed that humans were not smart enough to hunt. They actually were scavengers. And at that time, he was like a leader. So everybody started to write, yeah, humans were scavengers. And they proved that humans were scavengers.
Yeah.
And they wrote in the papers that now the consensus is clear. Humans were scavengers.
Yeah.
And now you look at today it's not the common belief. No, the common notion today is that humans were predators.
Mm.
I'm not the only one.
Yeah.
The field, like 99% of the people in the field will tell you that humans were smart enough to hunt. And one of them came up and said, look, chimpanzees hunt.
Yeah.
Why humans can't hunt?
Yeah.
It had to remind them.
Yeah.
That, and it took him to retire for the sense to come back.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, and yeah.
By the way, I must say that he contributed a lot to archaeology and to paleoanthropology. Yeah, in a field, he was a real genius, but he was
Yeah.
wrong. Indeed.
Well, I mean, that's the thing too, is that, you can't necessarily get everything right. And, well, not every, not every time anyway. And because he had so much credence in all the other things that he was doing, probably gave him, that standing. They said, well, I mean, this guy's saying it, it's probably true. He backs this stuff up, and maybe he had good reason.
Also, you want to publish, and his
Yeah, you
friends
do.
are sitting in the right places, and they
Yeah.
reviewing your papers.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
oh boy, it's a mess. It's a big mess. I don't want to go into it.
Yeah.
But science is a big mess.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Well, that's the thing, is when people have their own personal interests to protect as well. And my brother-in-law did his, he was like a programmer for Google and did his PhD in computer science at MIT, and now is a professor at the University of Washington in Seattle. And he did his PhD in theoretical quantum computing. So, we don't have quantum computers yet, but he was showing mathematically what we could do when we got them, which we
Right.
so it's quite a really far out there, very intellectual field. Not many people are in it, and as you would expect. And so he was publishing these papers saying, hey, and challenging certain things, saying, hey, you can look at this a little different way. You can do these in these ways. And he wrote these papers showing that and showing that mathematically. The whole idea was basically that there's this part of theoretical quantum computing that, like, you basically need these big, massive, specific equations to use. And his whole paper was arguing you don't need to use those. You can do them like this. And he sent these things off for publication, and it must have been like just the only guy doing the proofreading was doing the peer review for every single paper journal, because he kept getting these things back. And it's just a note on it. It's just like, for this sort of quantum computing, you need these kinds of equations. I didn't see any of these equations in the paper, therefore it's rejected. It's like, buddy, if you read the paper, it would have told you, like, it was arguing against doing that. And so, but this guy just like flipped through it and like, I don't see an equation here, throw it out. I mean, what a jackass that guy is. But, but that's his view. Like, nope, this is it. And he is the gatekeeper. He was a guy. And
that's how paradigms are built.
Yeah.
I mean, the gatekeepers are, holding the paradigm.
Yeah, that's it.
I mean, the theory that I told you right now, that, why the brain grew, yeah, we published it in a paper, Professor Barkai and myself. And it was interesting enough for some papers or some websites to go and ask the people that are leading the field. And the criticism was so weak and so poor. It was just disappointing, really. Like, that one criticism was, the growth of the brain was not linear. Well, who said it was linear?
Yeah. What does that have to do with anything?
Yeah, I mean,
yeah. Well, and if it were linear, that would maybe be less evidence of this. It's just like you have this marked increase. That means something changed and something's happening.
Yeah, I mean, you don't expect anything like that to be linear. This is crazy.
No, and yeah, I think
it is linear.
Yeah.
How is the theory dependent on the linearity of the growth of the brain?
Yeah, I think that's so funny too, because like, so many times people will say things like that, and it's just like they can just make these offhand comments, and maybe that works in some circles. When you point it out, it's like, okay, and why does that matter? And they're like, shit. I would love to hear what they had to say about that. Like, and okay, so go on. Like, what's the rest of your argument? Why does that even matter? I think a lot of times when people discussing almost anything, they get so used to being in certain circles that they can just say the same things over and over again, and no one challenges them on it. And then when someone just goes, okay, why does that matter? All of a sudden they're like, they realize that they haven't actually based it on much, and it doesn't sound like they did either.
Yeah. It's I tell you, it's difficult to get people to change their minds, and it's difficult. It's just difficult. It's difficult for scientists to change their mind. Although I tell you, the most successful ones are ones that are changing their mind very quickly.
Mhm.
The more flexible you are, the more successful you are as a scientist, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You have to change. You have to keep an open mind all the time,
Yeah. I
and
think it's
not
good.
afraid to say. I mean, the best archaeologist in Israel that I know is the one that, like he said, I think I told 3 times. Oh, I was wrong. I was wrong. I was wrong.
Mhm.
Yeah, he admits that he was wrong. He finds
Yeah.
something better, and he made progress.
Yeah. Well, I can admit I was wrong to ever eat lettuce. That was wrong. Should never have done that. Yeah. Can you tell me what are you working on any projects now, or what sort of work you're doing these days, or anything that's catching your interest?
I actually have 2 papers that I'm in the process of publishing. I haven't submitted them yet because my partner didn't have time to look at them. But that they will go out. One of them claimed that fire was first used, and this is, by the way, again, the economist in me. Fires were first used as protection from predators and not to cook.
Okay.
Because cooking doesn't add that much energetic return as protection from predation. If you hunt the large animals and you sit on it, you can sit on it for a month or a week or 2 weeks. If some predator comes around and take it away, you lost a lot of energy.
Yeah.
And you don't gain that much energy from cooking tubers. So that was one paper, and another one that also again tried to prove that this decline in prey size started many years ago and not just in the last 50,000 years. We published one paper that was quite comprehensive and on the Levant, on the area that we live here, which is a very good area for archaeological studies because we have many sites, and it is very narrow area. And you see, on the way from Africa to Europe, you almost must go through this area. So there are many sites for many periods, and we proved that the prey size declined markedly. So now I'm trying to extend it and show that it happened in Africa and Europe as well.
Okay.
And then I write a book. I actually wrote a book 12 years ago. And that I actually told you about. It's the one that when I wrote about the general implications of the hunter-gatherer being in modern society. So this is concerning anxiety and everything that mentally happened to us because we don't live anymore in a small group and we are dependent on people that don't know us and that we don't know. So it brings a lot of stress into our lives. So that was the book that I wrote in Hebrew 12 years ago. So now I'm sort of translating it to English, and I'm actually rewriting, translating, so half. And I will publish it. I think I won't bother with going through publishers. I will just do Amazon, what you may call it,
self-publication sort of thing.
Yeah. That's it. And then I have 2 other books that I want to write. Both of them actually summarizing all the theory of human evolution, that what I understood about human evolution, which of course, include the nutrition. So I have enough projects to keep me going for God knows how many years.
Yeah.
So I need to eat only.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, you got to stay on top of that.
I need to eat only carnivore.
Yeah.
So I have enough time to do it.
Yeah. That's That's really interesting about the fire. What did you find that made you think that this was more of a started out more as a defensive? I know that some people, well, I've heard people talk about that it might be have been used even in hunting as well. You sort of set fire to some grasses and that'll spook, some mammoths over a cliff or something like that as well. Did you? I don't even know how they proved that or that was just a theory. But what made you think about that?
Well, you see, this was a major problem in human evolution, is from when you get off the trees, how do you protect yourself?
Mm.
Forget about the hunting. How do you protect yourself on the ground? We don't run fast. We are we active during the day, so we sleep at night. How do you protect yourself? And still, you find primates, even terrestrial primates like baboons, but they sleep on trees and they go up to the high mountains to sleep. So it's a major problem for terrestrial animals to protect itself. Most of them don't sleep, herbivores.
Mm.
They just don't sleep during the night. And then you add to it the fact that we hunt, and there's nothing like a good carcass in the savannah to attract predators.
Yeah.
So the problem doubles. So the question was asked. I was not the first one to ask it. How do you protect ourselves? How did we protect ourselves? And the obvious answer is by fire.
Mm.
But fire costs, of course, energy. So you have to have a return on the energy that you expend. And so, like I told you, that the return on plants is 1/10 that of animals. So it's no brainer to think that the fire was used to protect the prey rather than to cook. You lose half the prey.
Yeah.
You have to cook a lot of tubers to get the same return.
Yeah. Oh, very good.
That was the idea.
Yeah. Well, I look forward to reading it when it comes out. And
It's simple economics. It's not. There's nothing. Yeah. It's not. Actually, I didn't think that this was a paper, but my partner, when he had this insight, he said, let's make a paper out of it.
Yeah.
So we are.
Well, it's always good to get those thoughts out as well. And I think that just you have those ideas, and it's it's a novel idea, and it's and you can back it up. It's good to publish those sorts of things and just get more discourse out there. I mean, I think that I've been remiss in not doing things like that from thoughts that I've had, and so I'm trying to actually get on top of that and actually start publishing some of these things. But it can be difficult with everything else I'm doing. But I think that it's good to do that, and I think that's something I need to do as well. So I'm glad you are. Yeah. All right. Well, and I thank you very much. I think we've been talking for nearly 2 hours now, so I don't want to hog your entire day. But thank you very much for coming on. That was a very, very interesting conversation. I'm really glad that we got a chance to do it.
Welcome. Lots of success in your spreading the news, spreading
the good word.
Torah,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and well, thank you very much. And where can people find you and follow you and find your work?
I have two blogs, but one in Hebrew, one in English. I'm not very active in them, so
yeah,
it's called Paleostyle.com, and that's it. And then I'm active a little bit on Twitter when I find something interesting, some interesting paper. So Ben-Dor Miki, Twitter. That's about it.
Great. Well, we'll put those links up in as well, and anyone can go and look up your papers on just even Google Scholar. It's very easy.
Right. I mean, yeah. That's the thing is that people that want to read papers,
Yeah.
at least read the abstract.
Yeah, and even just YouTube. I mean, there's other things on there as well. I think I came across one of your talks years ago before I knew who you were. I just happened to come across, and I was like, oh, this guy's making sense. And I think it was just titled "Are We Carnivores?" And it was like for ancestral living or life. Or something.
Health society.
Yeah, and so people can find that as well. And great. Well, Dr. Ben-Dor, thank you so much for coming on. I had a great time talking to you.
It was a pleasure.
Yeah,
it was a pleasure.
Great. Hope to do it again soon.
Thanks. Take care.
Thanks.
Bye.